Thank you, Jane. Ha-la-la-la-la-la. It's a good way to clear the throat and warm up. Much better than saying good morning. Well, the word collaboration and partnership exists in the dictionary for a long, long time. I remember 20 years ago, still practicing then, these words hardly appear in any corporate presentations or even in big groups like this. But today, you can't go to any conference without mentioning those words, collaboration and partnership. It's almost like a must-have. But yet, we haven't quite crossed over the path of the understanding of how we really achieve partnership and collaborations. I think we're still at baby steps in those areas. And in the 2 days that we spent in the game reserve, and we talk about, connecting GBCs who face shared policy challenges. And this is an area I think we're going to touch on further in the afternoon. And there are also lots of practical expertise in many GBCs that exist that we don't quite always get a handle on. Imagine we can just pool those expertise together. I think we can share a lot more on how we successfully collaborate, particularly with government and stakeholders. So today's government policy units in many countries, I think very similar. We are structured in a silo manner because climate change issues, government setups are sometimes are very archaic and very silo. Many different departments, many different ministries have their own agendas and their own KPIs to tackle. The same in Singapore. In fact, we realized that problem back in 2009, which is why 3 or 4 ministries, key ministries, were brought together under the Prime Minister's direction to collectively organize to tackle the issue of climate change. I think that is certainly something that requires visionary leaders to bring different government departments and ministry together. So I think in many countries we still face the same challenge. We have these different kind of ministries working in silo. Now, that is where sometimes in certain situations we need others to come in and say, let's work together. Surprisingly, they do work because many government departments don't really want to work together until someone else outside the government and say, hey, let's come together. So we have the third sector, the civil society that comes in. We have industry, of course, in GBC's case, which is very, very useful. And also sometimes the unusual suspects. I just shared earlier on with someone that with New Zealand GBC that in Singapore's case we have the different industry groups that form a so-called joint council, and the government doesn't quite see that it could work very well because it's still built on the old silo focus and agenda of different disciplines. But yet when GBC got started in 2009, the government loves to work with the GBC because it is neutral, it is representational of all industry bodies. And that is an example of how third sector or industry players can come in and become a kind of glue factor for all the different government sectors. So we have, I think the policy partnerships for government and industry, the benefits are clear to see and creates common goals and utilizes stakeholder expertise in policy making. In Singapore's case, certainly the case where government, before rolling out any policy, will have consultation with all the industry groups. And to, again, use the Singapore example, SGBC become very useful channel because we reach out to practically the whole building industry. Transparency and trust follows, and faster progress. This is very crucial because all of us, I think, having seen many of your corporate plans, everybody has a very urgent task to achieve. Most of us have to set high targets to be achieved in extremely short time. Take Singapore's case again, we have to green 80% of our existing buildings by 2030. And just when you think 2030 is a long time from now, think again. It is barely less than 20 years, right? So, and we have just about green about 10 to 20% of our existing building stock. We still have 80% to go. So that's a long, or rather 60% to go. That's a long way. And Now, a recent interview of, I think, 11 GBCs resulted in this publication called A New Era in Building Partnerships. I would encourage you, I think Jane has already sent this out, or the GBC. I would encourage you to take a detailed read of this document because it covers all the success stories of how different GBCs or bodies come together, working closely with government to achieve this partnership that are meaningful. In it, it outlines several principles that GBCs can adopt to achieve such a partnership. So we have phase one, which is scoping the issue. Later on, I'll use a few countries' example to explain this. But this is extremely crucial because we can't tackle everything under the sun. And especially working with government and across the board industry players, you can't have too many issues to tackle. You just got to scope it right. And phase two, make sure you have a stakeholder mapping and engagement. Make sure you cover all the ground in these few issues, focus issues, and get them all in. You shouldn't leave anyone out. And mapping the process and the progress forward is very important. Creating a common vision. There's nothing more divisive than having a kind of a blur mission statement or a kind of a diversive mission statement. So this is, again, having scoped it, having engaged the stakeholders, and that's what all have to come together to scope, or rather define this common mission. And structuring the platform. This requires a lot of organizations. So efficient organizations that are productive, that will then lead us to deliver the solutions in a timely manner. So, and finally, securing a legacy. In some ways, I would say, while phase 6 is securing a legacy, that might even have to be right in front so that we know what are we leaving behind, why are we doing it, before we even reach step 6 or phase 6. So I'm going to just share with you a few countries' example. You can find them all in the report. In this case, it's Australia. Australia has a body called the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council, ASBEC. Now, it has crafted its mission very clearly in transforming market behavior to foster a sustainable and resilient built environment. Certainly, in terms of structure, it has a wide representation of NGOs and government, but it is run by a very small, lean team, elective executives, small staff, governed by rules. And very interestingly, it also has a task group approach where it defines very clearly what are the tasks it's set out to do and then make sure that that is funded. And there are also very clear steps leading to the accomplishments of these tasks. So this is an example of how government is actually brought on very early. As you can see, the last sentence there, they came in very early to work with the task group to achieve specific tasks. I'll give you the second example in UK, and this is the Zero Carbon Hub, and I believe Paul chairs that body. And this is, again, a very interesting approach because it came about when there was a need to actually achieve, rather create zero carbon home from 2016. So there was a need, but yet at the same time, who is to take care of this dialogue between the government and the builders? And they saw a need and they built it up. So again, very strict timelines was enforced in this grouping, and it is also jointly funded by both the industry and government, but yet independent of both. So there is a joint ownership, which is again key to this successful partnership. And again, support from across political bodies. So collaboration, yes, but clear vision and also clear context in understanding what they are aiming to achieve, which is carbon zero home. Now, lastly, Singapore Green Building Council. We are actually a public-private partnership body. We are so-called started by the government, Singapore government, but in truth, actually, this is a kind of a ground-up initiative as well, because some of us in the industry bodies actually wanted to start the GBC, but interestingly, at the same time, the government, which is represented by Building Construction Authority, saw the need. And they very clearly said from day one that it has to be industry-led. So the government takes a take a step back, but yet chose to fund the setting up of the Green Building Council. So now they understand why this is so important as well, because Singapore is, in a way, in terms of legislation, all the buildings have to go green, required by Government Act. Yet I have always said that despite this government requirement, we are, in a way, still finding the market side is not really demanding green buildings. So instead of government going out to reach out to the market and say, hey, everybody goes green, the one most important tool is actually a Green Building Council, because we are neutral. We don't just represent government interests, we represent people's interests, so we're in the best position to reach out to the demand side. And last but not least, just leave a word of encouragement for those of you who feel that partnership with government is a long way to go. Be patient and be non-confrontational. In our case, it works, so I hope it works for you too. Thank you.